I'm gonna go ahead and start webinar, and then I think we're live. We're gonna give everybody 2 minutes, 2 more minutes to hop in, and we'll jump right into today's session. Welcome everyone. We are very excited to welcome attorney Evelyn Huang. She is a very experienced immigration attorney from the law office of Sabrina Lee. She's been practicing in California and New York for a long time. And then we're gonna talk about change of status. This is a very challenging but also very exciting topics for lots of our students and our attendees. So in today's session, we're going to cover timelines and also tips if you come in with the B visa, how to change status to F1 and then maybe work in the US with day one CPT. We're also going to talk about solutions for layoffs if you have a work visa, for example, H1B visa, L1 visas. What could be the solutions for you to continue to stay in here? And then also we're going to cover spouse visa. I know we have lots of audience coming from an H4 or an F2 background. You wanted to do change of status and see what kind of abilities that you're capabilities to have to study, to work in the US. We're going to explore that. And then we're going to have a live Q&A session with Evelyn. She's a very experienced immigration attorney, as I mentioned. And if we didn't get to you, I know we're going to have lots of questions. So if you come in with the questions, feel free to send them in right now at the Q&A box. Our colleagues will gonna collect your questions and hopefully we can answer them in the next part. We're gonna take probably a couple seconds for more people to jump in. Meanwhile, I want to make sure that I enable Q&A so you guys can send in questions. I think I did. Perfect. So I think I'm gonna jump right in. We have a lot of people hopping on. Welcome in everyone to today's sessions. We're very excited to welcome immigration attorney Evelyn Huang with us. She's gonna go through timelines and tips for B visa to F1 and then solutions for H1B, L1 layoffs, change status, and also spouse visa, H4, F2. We're going to cover all of that good stuff. And remember, we're going to have a Q&A sessions on the second half of the webinar. So send in your questions in the Q&A box and we're happy to answer them for you. If we didn't get to your questions, don't worry, scan the QR code on the left for a WhatsApp consultation and on the right for WeChat. If you want legal services or consultations, we can connect you with the law office as well. Before I jump in, I want to quickly talk about what we do, who we are. We are Go Lead Inc. We are a education consultancy located in Los Angeles, Pasadena. Our primary services will be day one CPT university applications. We also do F1 reinstatement guides, emergency transfer, change of status support as well. So our mission is to always make students' American dreams come true. We are certified by AIRC as one of the most respectful organization in the education industry. And then you guys can feel free to check us out on Google reviews as well. We currently have more than 500 Google reviews, so you can see what other people say about us, other students' stories and experiences. And then finally, this is our contact information, our social medias. Feel free to follow us, see what we post. And without further ado, I will jump into the other presentations that Evelyn has for us to jump right into today's topics. Okay. Meanwhile, Evelyn, while you're sharing the screen, do you also wanted to say hi to our students and briefly talk about yourself? I'm going to give you the proper introduction, so don't worry about that. But do you wanted to say hi?
Sure. I'll just have quickly say hi. Hi, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's jump right into today's presentations. And if we wanted to go into the next slides. I already see some people sending in questions. Those are great. Our colleague Kristen is going to collect your questions and we'll answer that in the second half of the webinar. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today's speaker, our guest, Evelyn Huang. So she has her Juris Doctor. She's graduated from New England School of Law and she's been practicing for more than 10 years. She's both been admitted by the New York Supreme Court and the California Supreme Court, and also the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. And she is a member with the American Immigration Laws Associations, as well as the California Lawyers Associations and New York State Bar Associations. So this is Evelyn, our speaker, and then we will also briefly cover what they do in their law offices. Let's go to the next slides. All right, so you guys can read from these slides. This is the practice areas of law office of Sabrina Lee. You can see complex F1 status related issues, RFEs and IDs, and also other visas applications as well when it comes to green card and other H1B visa, work visa, and those types. If we wanted to jump right into today's sessions, I will be starting by introducing the topics once again. So we're going to cover different visas, change of status to F1. And for example, the H1B work visa, the L1 work visa, if you experience layoff or anything like that, you probably wanted to transition to keep a legal status and also wanted to plan for future employment opportunities. If you come in with the spouse visa like F2, H4, what are the options to change your status? And then also B1, B2, we're going to cover change your status to F1 as well. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about H1B layoffs. So I'm going to provide to make this more interactive, I'm going to provide like a scenario. And then Evelyn, you can jump in with your expertise and also your advice for this kind of situations. So if a person is a H1B visa holder, recently getting laid off, and this person might have having those fears that is very common and wanted to contact somebody to support with change of status, and what would be the solution for that. All right, so the first question would be, how can the person apply for this change of status as a H1B background?
Okay, so as an H1B holder who has recently been laid off, he actually has a 60-day grace period from the termination of his employment to find a good school, a suitable school, and apply for change of status. It is very important to find a good program that aligns with A's background, educational background. Because if he decides to go, for example, a ESL, English as Second Language program, this may cause a negative impact to his change of status application. As we all know, H1B is a bachelor degree type of visa. So if you want to go kind of like downgrade to an ESL program, USCIS might not believe your intent to change your status to F1. Then once you find a good school, you're admitted to it, the school will issue an I-20, then A can gather this I-20 along with all the supporting documents to file an I-539 application with the USCIS to change his status. Ryan.
Yeah, for sure. And then before we can, I want to make sure that this screen is also up so people could see the questions. So before we ask the second questions, the previous questions, we are talking about how can an H1B holder transition to change of status, transition to another visa to maintain his studies or her studies. Now I want to ask the second question. So how long does the whole process take? And Evelyn, do you mind also keeping the slides up so people can see the questions?
Of course. And that's a very interesting, not interesting, I would say that's a very common question. That's pretty much the first or the second question client would ask. How long does it take? Honestly, we don't really have an answer. Processing time vary by case, and it could take up to several months. However, we do have a good news. USCIS recently made premium processing services available for applicants seeking to change status to F1. As long as you agree to pay additional service fee to USCIS, which is $1,965, USCIS promise to take an adjudicative action on your case within 30 business days. Well, that's a good news. Otherwise, before it could last up to like 6 months, 8 months, now it's 30 business days. But you get what you pay for. You do have additional filing fee in order to get this service. Ryan.
For sure. I think one of the additional questions I will add to this point, I understand that we're talking about H1B first. We're talking about H1B to F1, but then also, is there any other type of visas that allows premium processing? I do understand that H1B changes status to other visas. You can do premium processing, but what if from other background? Is premium processing allowed as well?
That's a good question. So for premium processing, in these circumstances, is you could change from any non-immigrant status. As long as you are changing into F1 status, premium processing is available. So just take our today's topic, for example. We have H1B, we have L, we have F, F2, what I meant, B1, B2, right? All those are applicable to use premium processing as long as they are seeking to change it to F status.
For sure. All right, let's go move on from this questions. And the third questions, when it comes to H1B layoff is, can this person study while the change of status happens? I assume this is for H1B to F1. For example, this person wanted to get into day one CPT. Could he join school during the change of status applications?
Short answer is no. This person must wait until the change of status is approved before beginning his studies. Ryan.
All right, sounds good. And then next question is, what happened if this person's application is denied? Sometimes this kind of situation does happen. And what are the solutions if the application denies?
If this person's application is denied, then he will be considered as out of status and will begin to accrue unlawful presence from the date of the denial. We all know that's very important to maintain lawful status if you want to continue staying in the States and possibly, applying for other immigration benefit. But denial is really based on the reason. This person might have an option to file motion to reopen, motion to reconsider. So there are some procedure to save your case, but that goes case by case. So if you do have this type of question or you're currently facing a denial, I would say scan the QR code from your screen and our legal team will be happy to help you.
For sure. All right, let's move on to next situation. I think we're gonna cover F2. I also think this goes like universal, not just F2, but to any spouse visa necessarily. So I think F2 is a very similar situation to H4. For example, somebody come in, your spouse has an H1B visa and you come in as an H4 spouse, and then later on, you decided to join schools, you wanted to change your status. So this could be very similar procedures because you're coming from a spouse visa background to a student's visa background. And Evelyn, please correct me. Evelyn, please correct me if I'm wrong in this. But we're not going to jump in specifically to F2 for now. If this person has been in the US under F2 for a couple years and then is under certain situations wanted to change to another visa, or that F2 visa is no longer effective, we want to talk a little bit about what could be the solutions here. And next slides. So the first question would be, what are some of the advantages that F1 status have compared to a F2? Or I wanted to add on that compared to an H4.
So some advantage that F1 has compared to F2, I would say F1 is principal, right? So has a greater independence. He controls his own status. Number two, with the F1 status, you do have work authorization possibility. Everyone should already heard of CPT, OPT, STEM OPT, right? This is not available for F2. For H1B though, F1 is compared to, I'm sorry, Ryan, you were saying H4?
H4, yes, the
Okay.
spouse visa.
Same thing, work authorization. Yes, H4 at some point it's possible to get work authorization, but that's very long time later. And also it really depends on the principal applicant, the H1B holder, his immigrant cases status, right? But F1, as long as you maintain your F1 during school, we will discuss more, we'll cover more in the next questions, but during school, after school, you do have those work authorization, even though it's restricted, but you will be able to work. But for H4, you just have to wait until your H1 husband or wife or your spouse get to a certain point to enable you to have the eligibility for an EAD card, employment authorization.
Yeah, and we actually encountered those questions a lot. Some of our students are coming from an H4 background and wanting to start gaining those work experience in the US and possibly make some income because, they do have family, spouse, and children. So change of status could be a great way for you. Either you have an H4 or you have an F2 to transition to F1 and then to start working and gaining experience while studying. And then let's go to the second questions. So how can the person who has an F2 background apply for change of status from F2 to F1? What are the requirements for the person?
So the procedure is pretty much the same. You have to file a change of status application with the USCIS. As an F2 though, I would advise you do this before you lose your status. For example, from our question earlier, B is facing a divorce. So we mentioned that F2 is a dependent status. Once the divorce is finalized, his or her F2 status is over. And there's no chance for this person to apply for change of status. So you want to do it as early as possible. Then same procedure, find a school, get admitted, receive an I-20, and then you complete your application. Don't forget to include a statement of intent and your financial documentation showing that you're not going to be a public burden to the US government. And then you'll be able to support yourself, not just for your study, but your living in the States.
For sure. Thanks for those helpful tips and also sharing, what is required as the materials. Let's go to the next question. So, is it possible to change that from F2 to F1 in the US, or is it better to do it this way? In the US, change the status from F2 to F1, or should I just attempt, apply for F1 visa, do an F1 stamping out of the country?
I would say each has its own pros and cons. If you want to do it in the States, good thing is you don't need to travel. And as we discussed earlier, premium processing services is now available, so it is possible to get a faster result. Downside is though, if you plan on travel in the future, USCIS approval, the change of status approval is not a visa. It's not gonna stop you from leaving the US, but it's not gonna allow you to come back. You still have to go through consular processing to get that visa attached to your passport. But it really depends on the applicant's needs and their schedule. I would say it's roughly the same, but plan ahead.
For sure. Absolutely. And moving on. So, final questions. What are the common mistakes people make when requesting change of status, especially from a spouse visa background? So, how could they avoid those problems, those mistakes?
Common mistakes, I would say, especially from F2 to F1, timing. I have emphasized on the timing that you want to do it before your divorce finalized. And preparing for a change of status application is not a one-day process. For example, it might take you some time to find a good school, to find a suitable school, to get I-20 issued and prepare I-539 application, even though it's a short application, but it could take time, especially if you are not, doing this for a living. You're doing this for first time. So timing is important. Remember, once your divorce is finalized, your F2 is gone. Okay, you want to do it before and then plan ahead. Another common mistake, we also mentioned that earlier, study before approval. Just wait until enrolling into classes. It's okay, you can get admission, you can get I-20, but don't start enroll in classes or even go to school yet until you have the USCIS approval.
And a lot of, sorry to
No,
interrupt.
it's okay. Go
I
ahead,
just
Ryan.
wanted to add it from my point. A lot of students come to us from a F2 or an H4 background, wanted to change status to F1 to start using CPT as a work authorization. Probably you find an internship or a job already during your F2 or your H4, but you couldn't get started. But then Evelyn mentioned this point is that if you couldn't start school, during your change of status stage, you couldn't stop your employment either because you don't have the CPT work authorization yet. So everything needs to be ready to kick in after your change of status is approved and you're officially F1, and then you have all of these capabilities to work under authorization and stuff like that.
Correct. Ryan, you're right on it.
Right.
So I'm gonna show you my next slide. Again, this is a code to our office. If you're facing a similar situation, feel free to scan this code and then contact our office. Our next topic is actually B1, B2,
Right.
which I mentioned earlier.
This is getting more and more common as well. Some people would intentionally come in as a B1, B2 visa, but some people also genuinely wanted to change status once they got into the US. So if a person, for example, entered the US on a B2 visa, on a visitor visa, and this person find a school that he or she wishes to attend in the US, but you cannot go to school as a visitor, as a B1, B2. So you have to change your status. And the situation, I guess the questions would be, what are the steps if you come in as a visitor that you need to take to attend a school in the US?
Same procedure, which we already discussed twice during the previous questions. For this specific scenario, though, this person is a B2 visa holder. I would add on to advise you to wait 90 days after entry to file your change of status to avoid USS challenge your intent. When we say intent, when you apply for B1, B2 visa, you're pretty much telling the consular that you're here for travel or for business. For B2, you're here for travel, right? You come in and you tell CBP at the airport, I'm here for sightseeing. Then later on, you genuine change your mind, you want to study, that's okay. So we have this 90-day grace period rule that it's better to wait for 90 days to file your application just to establish your initial intent when you enter the States is sightseeing, is B2, is not F1. I hope I make it clear. Like, if you
Yeah,
want to go to school, you could have applied F1 visa, but you didn't.
yeah,
Now you are telling us you change your mind, which is okay, totally okay. But if you do it right immediately, 10 days a day after your entry, that kind of a little bit suspicious, don't you think,
right.
Ryan?
Right, right, absolutely. And this is all what we tell students as well. Don't, you know, if your intention is to visit, you have to visit for a while for you to change your mind. You can't just get to the US and then second day you wanted to change status. They might question why you get the B visa or the other visa in the first place. So yeah, I think that answers most of us's questions in terms of timelines when it comes to changing status from B to F1. Let's go to the second questions. So if the person from the B1, B2 background starts attending to school without changing the status, what will be the consequences?
The key rule here is what visa you use to enter, that's your status in the States. Again, for B visa, you're here for leisure, for business. You're not here to study for school. That's F1. Okay, so if you enter the States on a B2 visa and later on wants to attend school, you want to make sure you do a change of status application and gets approved before you actually pursue your degree or your study. Otherwise, you will be found for violating your B2 status, which is going to have a serious immigration consequences.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And my next question, so what are I would say, the key factors for change your status from B2 to F1 in order to get approved? What should the people watch out for?
All the change of status pretty much requires similar documents. For this specific situation, B2 to F1, you want to have a clear statement of intent. You want to put it in writing, describe why you change your mind, why now you decide to go to school. It's like, tell the USCIS officer who review your case that when I first entered the States, I'm here, and then later on, I found this country pretty, I had my good time, and now I find it a good school, or I suddenly have, a feeling to pursue a new degree. And I already always know that US education system is pretty good, and I have the chance, so I want to change status to F1. Any reason, that's fine. You want to put it in writing and let officer knows why now you're changing status to F1. That would be in addition to the regular processing, one of the required documents or important documents to be included in a B2 to F1 change of status application.
For sure. All right, last questions for B1, B2. How long does the change of status process, typically? And should the people, how long should the person prepare for this B2F change of status?
Same processing could take months, but if you are willing to pay additional, premium processing is available. I would add, during this time, if you're doing change of status, just make sure you're not engaging in any violation that goes against your B2 status. For example, work without authorization. Ryan, you mentioned CPT. This is where that comes in. If you do have an offer and you find a school that offer day one CPT, you don't want to start working until you have your approval. And then you can go ahead and study and then do your work.
Yeah, this is something we can emphasize enough. If you have other requests for legal services, please feel free to scan the code. I also wanted to add on the point previously. So some students might think that if I do change your status, I can start my job anytime during the applications, and then I'm going to that school and start CPT anyways. But this is actually, CPT has a strict timeline of approval date and end dates for each work authorization. So keep in mind that you cannot start working and cannot getting paid under a different visa, not the F1 visa under CPT. So let's go to the final, I believe is the final side of the change of status. We're going to discover L1. And I do notice that we are on a pretty tight timeline. We had a lot of questions. So I'm thinking we could wrap up this part. a little bit sooner and we can get into your live questions. So if you have a Q&A questions after this presentation or you came in with the questions, feel free to send it into our Q&A and we will get to your questions soon. So L1 visa, if I have a L1 visa, I'm an executive into a company, multinational companies, but the L1 visa is reaching to the end, or I am getting fired, laid off, joining my L1, and I wish to remain in the US. So I sign up for a program, maybe an MBA program or other program. So what could be the solutions? Let's talk about that. And I guess my first question is it possible for someone in student status to work while attending school? We covered, we talked a little bit about day one CPT. Now, if you're transitioning from a work visa background to F1 background, are you still gonna be able to work?
Yes, you have day one CPT as we covered before, and also there's a pre-completion OPT, which also allows a student to work while in school session and also outside of school session. However, I would make a note on that. Pre-completion CPT something would go to impact your post-completion OPT, which is after you complete your program. It could, whatever time you spend during school under the pre-completion OPT could go into deduction of your final 12 months post-completion OPT.
Right. And one point I wanted to add is that if you're doing CPT, day one CPT from, the first semester, you're absolutely allowed according to university policies, because for change of status, different universities do have different CPT policies. But if the university allowed you to do so, but you also want a OPT after CPT, one thing to mind is that you do have to mind how long you've been working with CPT, because working full-time with CPT for a longer period, for example, more than 12 months, can make you ineligible for OPT. If you don't want an OPT after school, you can use full-time CPT for the whole duration of the program. All right, let's ask the second questions. Evelyn, so what is CPT in particular, and how do I get the CPT?
Well, CPT is curricular practical training. That's pretty much the work authorization while student is in school. I think Ryan knows a lot about it. How do we get it? CPT has a specific requirement, which is different from OPT and later on a STEM OPT. You do have to have a job offer. And then you need to apply, or more or less, to contact your school, international student office, or whoever in charge of this, have your designated school official do so to recommend CPT. The only a different thing as OPT though. This one requires job offer. However, it doesn't require you to file application with USCIS. So long story short, simple answer is you need to have a job offer. You only deal with your school do so. USCIS is out of picture for CPT, but it is, I would say it's a more simplified procedure because you're not really dealing with USCIS. As long as you have the job offer, you go with your school, DSO will tell you how to do it. But like you said, you don't wanna, you do wanna monitor your time spent on your CPT because it could impact your post-completion OPT.
For sure. Let me quickly start recording so that we can, have more students. And we're also streaming on YouTube for today's session. If you do want to rewatch the whole session, you can feel free to go to our YouTube channel. We'll send you guys an email if you miss some of the part going in. So let's ask the number 3 questions. What actions should an L1 visa holder take to achieve change of status, to achieve the goal to continue in the US, pursue education, and then also work in the future?
I would say well, this goes to the scenario. We have a person who comes from work to school and he wants to study MBA program and also while in the meantime still working for his company. I would say CPT is probably the best option for now. But CPT usually requires a 4-year academic year. You have to complete a 1 full academic year in order to get to CPT. However, we do have some schools offer day 1 CPT. You want to make sure the school that you apply for your MBA program offers day 1 CPT. Otherwise, the regular rule is you have to complete 1 year and then you are eligible for CPT.
Yeah, definitely each university has different settings and educational CPT policies as well. So we definitely recommend you to consult with Go Elite. And then our consultants can provide free consultations on finding the right school, right program for your kind of background. All right, if you have any other legal concerns, questions, consultation needs, and services need, scan the QR code to connect with the law office of Sabrina Lee. And let's move on from this slide. And I think we are wrapped up for today's presentations. And if you have, here is Ms. Huang and also the law office of Sabrina Lee's contacts. So if you want to contact them, feel free to scan the codes or send them an email, follow them on social. And without further ado, I will get into today's Q&A sessions to get into your guys' questions live. And I will start sharing my screen. Okay. All right. I wish you can see my screen now. And then let's go to the first question. So this person wanted to say that if, I see, some talk about gray areas. So I guess his point or her point is that will change your status be a gray area, or will it be a challenge if I wanted to have future immigration applications, petitions, if my history in change your status is going to be in any effect?
I do have clients ask me similar questions. I think change of status is allowed by the law as long as you do it in compliance with immigration law. That should be okay. There are some situations I know sometimes. Take the most common situation which happened, just over H1B lottery. A lot of students who participated in the lottery section was unsuccessful, and their schools has ended. Sometimes their OPT is probably going to end soon or already ended, but they still want to stay in the States. What are they going to do? They could continue their study. They could change their status. I have a client who has a longer time period OPT and then seeking to change a status to B2 just to survive long enough to stay in the States to be able to participate in next year's lottery. Again, like I said, it is okay for you to change your mind as long as you do it legally and you do not engage in any other violation of your term. For example, you don't try to work while you're changing status to B2, or you have already changed your status to B2. You don't start working, start finding job. As long as you don't do those stuff, I would say it is okay. And then even if in the future, USS questions your intent to change your status, you documented your application well, it is rebuttable. USS cannot just say, oh, sorry, I have doubt, your situation is just very questionable. Regardless, I'm going to find you inadmissible. No, they're not going to do that. Okay. Sometimes they're being mean, but they still have to follow the rules, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right. That is well put. And let's go to the second question. So I guess this question is not relevant to change status, but could you quickly address this? I know people care about L1s. So how long is L1B valid? And is L1B qualified for an EB3?
L1B is not leading to, I would say EB3 is a different category. If your employer, which is also your sponsor, agreed to sponsor your EB3 green card, you can do that. L1B will give you a status to stay as long as your employer continues the offer and you remain eligible.
Thank you so much for that information. Let's move on. Next questions. I'm very glad to see these questions because we already covered that in previously. So we cannot stress this enough. So thank you for giving us the opportunities. So I already get submitted my change status documents. And could I start classes before receiving the decision, or do I need to wait? I think the simple question is that you cannot start classes to, if you're going to a day one CPT school, you cannot start term, start CPT. You can do none of that until your F1 change your status to F1 is approved and you have a valid F1 status. All right. You have anything to add?
I would say for the second part, what if the decision is delayed, then the starting date of the course? I don't know if this person has filed premium processing, but I think this now is the good time. If your course is about to start, pay that $1,965 and have USS adjudicate your case within 30 business days.
Right.
If not, still delaying, you could get a renewed I-20. Right. So I would say, even if your course is about to start and you still don't have your change of status approval, just don't go to school yet. Can't emphasize more.
Yeah, and if you're going to a day one CPT schools, some of the schools that we partner with does have multiple intakes throughout the year. So if you want, for example, if you're aiming to start in September, but the application hasn't been approved, you can always tell the school DSO and tell your admissions advisor that you wanted to postpone the start of classes to the next enrollment and then start classes later, and that should be okay. And let's move on to the next question. So I'm currently on H4, waiting for my EAD. Will change to F1 and then back to H4 be a problem? I don't know your intention of changing back to H4, what that is, but then also could you quickly address to that situation?
Yeah, I would say this one really depends on who asks this question, the intent. It feels like this person's spouse's H1 immigration case has been reached to a point that in H4, as a spouse, H4 would be able to apply for EAD. And changing to F1 is that for going to school, but H4 you could go to school. So I really don't see why you want to take this multiple terms going to F1 and then H4 without knowing, like for more information. I don't think I will be able to advise on this properly because I really don't know why we're going through this scenario.
All right, sounds good. Let's go to the next question. So, can we travel internationally on day one CPT? I think we get asked about this a lot, and day one CPT is under F1, but from a change of status background, for example, if somebody changed their status and travel internationally, could they do that? What are the tips?
Yes, you could. Change of status is just a way you get to your F1 status, right? It's no different than you go ahead directly apply for F1. But if you do travel, remember, you will have to get your visa in order to come back to the States and then continue your day one CPT or your employment. So plan ahead, have a good schedule, check your the consulate in your home country, make sure you get your visa interview appointment set before you go.
For sure. And if any of the students that for example, you're already an F1 student or you're wanting to explore change status and you also wanted to do international travels, I highly recommend you to scan the code to talk to our consultants for free or directly reaching out to the university you're interested in regarding their international travel policies. So that can provide you with more free resources you can consider before you actually go. All right, and move on. Does the school's ranking or school status affect F1 visa applications? Is it better to apply for an F1 visa or switch for an F2 visa. I think we covered this in the presentation. When it comes to comparison to getting F1 stamped or to do change status from F2 to F1. If you missed the presentations, I highly encourage you to review the recordings that we're going to send you. But could you also address the other part of the questions? Does the school ranking or school accreditations or anything like that affect the F1 visa applications?
I would say it does benefit the application, but let's just say you're not going to an Ivy League school for your change of status. You're not going to get denied simply because you're not going to apply for, a high-ranking school. This would be, I would say, a high-ranking school or accredited school will matter more for applicants who, let's say, outside of student age range. Like some people at their 40s, 50s, they decided they want to learn more, they want to pursue another degree, or they want to get a F1 status to stay in the States. They apply for a school. I think USS does take this into consideration. If you are applying for a school that's not as good, let's just put it this way, your intent is likely to be questioned. I'm not saying your application will be denied, but you might get a strict scrutiny on your application.
Yeah, I think one thing to add is that no matter what kind of rankings the school you're enrolling into, always track the accreditations that the school has, because US has national accreditations, regional accreditations, and make sure that the schools that you wanted to get in does have those proper accreditations, because they are accreditation bodies, screening every year regarding what should the university follows and how good this university is. And another thing is that when you're doing change of status, for example, to an F1, you does have to provide reasoning of why you chose this school. So no matter how good this school is, you do have to say, hey, this kind of program attract me and this classes and whatever, and the reasons why you're going to that school. So no matter is a day one CPT universities or is a higher ranking universities, you do have to have reasonings of why you're going to that schools, and your primary intention should be educations. And all right, I think this questions, and let's move on. This person have an H4 visa and wanted to change status to F1. And this is a more of a general questions. I think this person wanted to understand more about, is getting into F1 and use day one CPT allowed or okay? And is there any procedures illegal in this point?
No, doing that is not illegal, it's actually allowed. But make sure you find the school that you apply to does offer day one CPT. We touched on this before. CPT usually requires one full year. But I have seen a lot of school that offers day one CPT. So you want to make sure you apply to the right school.
Right, absolutely. And if you have questions, finding the schools that is right for you, Go Elite is here for you. So talk to our consultant. Based on your backgrounds, we can recommend for free some of the school for you. Let's move on. What are the common reasons for denial on change status to F1? This is a very good question.
That's a good question. I would say one of the common reason, which you might think that's common, but it's failure to maintain status. So by changing status, you need to change from a valid status to another one, which here would be F1. So regardless which status you're changing from, you need to prove that you have maintained that status until the time you file your change of status application. Take our previous example, the one who is facing divorce. If by the time he filed his change of status application, his divorce was already finalized, he no longer espoused to the F1 principle, he loses his F2, and then at the time he filed his change of status, he does not have a valid status to change from, and that USCIS is going to deny his application.
For sure. And then one thing I would like to add is that for some cases, some people's status expires after they file for change of status. For example, as you mentioned, getting divorced, or as some other situation, for example, H1B experience laid off, or H4, that they lose their status, but they still have this grace period, and they filed for change of status to another status. While they are waiting for approval, are they allowed to also stay in the US, or should they leave the US because they, how this works?
As long as the application is properly filed, timely filed, while the application is pending USCIS review, they are allowed to stay in the States. They're not allowed to go to school, but they're allowed to stay in the USCIS, in the States.
Right.
For that grace period, that's a really good point, Ryan. But F2 doesn't have. If you are on H1B, you get laid off, you do have the grace period. That's okay. During that time, you are allowed to change your status. But if you wait for too long, say after the grace period, same thing applies to you. There is another measure to save those untimely filing, which you have to prove situation beyond your control. So I would say if our audience who is having this trouble, feel free to contact our firm. We are specialized in handle this untimely filing. If your situation qualifies for what I was described as the MPT request, you will be able to file even after your status expires.
For sure. All right, let's move on. So this person said, I'm on a H4 visa. If my F1 visa application is not approved, what will be the status of my H4 visa? Will the H4 remain, or, is my H4 still valid, or do I have to, go back to my own home country? I guess the visa applications refers to change status.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I believe this person is asking about change of status from H4 to F1. If the application is not approved, then as long as you are still the spouse to the H1B principal, and that principal maintains an H1B status, you are H4.
Sounds
even
good.
if your change of status is denied.
Yes, to your point is that even their change of status application to F1 get rejected for any reasons, they can still hold their valid H4 status and then continue staying in the US.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think for question 10, we already covered this when it comes to traveling after change of status or traveling during day one CPT. So we wouldn't be answering these questions. If you missed those parts, feel free to watch the recordings that we sent you. So we're gonna go right to the next questions. So I have a hard time understanding on this part, but let's just answer this in this fashion, that what should you do to file for change of status? What are the simple steps if I do wanted to change my status? What should I start?
Well, I will assume let's not assume anything. If you want to change your status, our topic today is change status to F1. For that one, I have repeated saying you have to find your school, of course. Get admission, find your I-20, gather all relevant documents. That relevant documents include a statement of intent, and also I have touched on that, proof that you have maintained a valid status before changing.
For sure. Thank you, Evelyn. And let's move on. Does changing jobs during day one CPT affects my H1B applications? Does changing job during day one CPT? Oh, this is the same ones. So, this one would be more on the F1 side if this person changed jobs, and while he or she is applying for H1B, what would happen?
Changing job during day one CPT while this person is under F, as long as you do this in compliance with the law, day one CPT, as I said, you have to report your change of employment with your school. As
Yes.
long as you do this, you don't secretly change your job, I would say, I'm going to say that you will be okay. And then also, we do know for CPT, your employment needs to be related to your major, the program you're studying. All right, so I think the short answer is, as long as you do this in compliance with the law, that should not affect your H1B application.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. If someone has used A1 CPT, is there more risk of getting RFE when they file for H1B? And what are the common problems that will cause that RFE?
I assume the RFE is referring to H1B application. No, again, day one CPT is allowed by the law. As long as you do it legally, it should not affect your future application. For a common problem with RFE, for H1B RFE, I would say maintain status. OPT, usually when people doing H1B, a lot of time that they are already with someone, with an employer under OPT or even CPT. Okay. That would go like USS does check on their employment record just to make sure that you didn't work illegally without authorization. You have been in compliance with your OPT terms. I would say one of the hot topic these days is finding, it's like a fake company issuing offer letter to people for them to report to school to maintain an OPT status. And Findring has been sued and convicted. USCIS is actually reflect this people had previous engagement or association with Findring and then issuing RFE during their H1B application or even their green card. Because Findring has been that's a case that's from years ago, but still, we're still seeing those impact today to some of our clients' cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even though if you're doing day one CPT that is totally legal and allowed, you do have to fulfill your student duty and do it according to the university CPT policies. So as long as you do follow those procedures under the law, I don't think this could cause a large problems. Let's move on to the next questions. Can you tell I think this person wanted to know, the range of your legal services. I do recommend you to scan the code directly because we don't know what kind of services that you're talking about. So scan the QR code, we can connect you with the law firm, and then you guys could directly consult with any services that you want. Let's go on. If we change our status to F1 and get denied, how should we process back to the initial status, or should we process back to the initial status?
If you change your status to F1 and gets denied, your initial status, unless you already lost it, otherwise, there is no way you could change it back. You could leave the country and apply another visa to come back in. For example, that's what I'm saying. If before there was a question saying if I'm in if I remember correct, H4 and my change of status to F1 get denied, do I still get maintain my H4 status? Yes, as long as you're still eligible for H4, you are still the spouse to H1B, right? In this question, I'm not sure what the initial status is while the change of status application is pending. It's hard to provide advice, but I would say if your change of status to F1 is denied, you want to consider if you are eligible for motion to reopen or reconsider. Fight for your change of status. And of course, welcome you to contact our firm and to get a full consultation based on your specific situation.
Sure. All right. Thank you for that answer. Let's move on to the next one. If I get a new job sponsoring my H1B while I am under change of status application, can I request to withdraw the applications? I think this question comes to some different aspects. For example, if you get sponsored of an H1B, do you get that H1B spontaneously? And also another thing to think is that if the change of status is withdrawable.
Change of status before a decision being rendered, yes, it is. You can withdraw your application. It's up to your discretion. But whether H1B is obtained spontaneously, depending on when this new sponsor filed the H1B application, what status this person is in. I would say you want to consider withdraw your change of status if you are certain that your H1B application will be timely filed, just to avoid all the technical issue. I'm not saying about the substance, but at least timely filed properly, all sorts of things being taken care of, then you can proceed with change of status. In immigration, we have this last application rule, meaning the last approved status is going to be your status in the States. So say this person filed, the new sponsor filed a H1B application petition for this person, while his change of status application is still pending. H1B petition for some reason gets decision sooner than the change of status. So this person goes back to H1B again, then change status to something else, which is a subsequent approval, then he lost his H1B. So you do want to watch out for the timeline. And if you have questions, contact professionals to go through your specific situation. I can only provide your general advice, but your specific situation could vary and could affect what legal advice you should receive.
For sure. And do want to, at the end of today's sessions, I do want to emphasize that today's session is for education purposes only. We're not giving anybody any legal advice. If you are seeking legal advice, we recommend you to scan the code and we can connect you with the immigration attorney. And to answer the final questions, I think another thing you do need to consider is the H1B lotteries. We can't forget the H1B lotteries. Did you participated in H1B lotteries and did you get selected? This could be very crucial for your employers to actually apply to proceed with the application, because if you have somebody sponsoring you, you don't get the H1B right away. You actually do have to go through the lotteries for most of the companies, and if you are working with a cap accept H1B employers, you don't necessarily have to go over the H1B lotteries, but we do recommend you to seek legal advice into how you should get the H1B, because this is not guaranteed 100%. All right, I think we are over time. I think we do have a couple questions we haven't got into yet, but don't worry. If you scan the code, talk to our consultants. We're happy to help you with any questions you have around, F1 and Day 1 CPT. If you seek legal consultations or any legal services, scan the QR code. We can connect you with the immigration attorneys. And I want to thank everybody for coming in today. Especially, I want to thank Attorney Evelyn Huang for your amazing presentation and addressing so much questions, concerns for our attendees. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan. Happy to be here.
All right, thank you. Hopefully we can do this again very soon. And everybody, if we didn't get to your questions, don't worry. Talk to us. We will find the right solutions for you. And always watch out for Goldie's webinar sessions. We are happy to see you once again for our future sessions, whether it's with the universities or immigration attorneys. We're happy to have you back. All right, have a wonderful rest of your evening, Evelyn and other attendees. Have a good night.
Good night.